hopefully it's worked straight away. But we'll get going, shall we? Hopefully the chat can see us now. I can't see if they can though. It looks like it's a little bit slow now as well, which is a bit of a pain. But there we are. You ready, Nick?
Yep, I'm ready.
Cool. All right. Can someone in chat tell us if you can hear us and stuff, and then we'll kick off. As you can see, fancy new graphics and things like that. So, quite looking forward to it. I'm hoping it just all works and we're not just kind of moving around. Can you see the YouTube or anything?
Hello. I can see it now.
This is working.
Hopefully just come on
straight away. Perfect. We'll get perfect. All right. So we're going to kick off now. Let's go. So, on a night where Jesus converts past Pope and pleases Romans everywhere by being on the end of a cross, we're back on YouTube. Yes, it's a welcome to everybody who's here. Welcome to WGTA Live. As you can see, our good friend Marco has helped us out with the design, and FPL Dave and Pet at Fantasy Football Index Guide have helped us work out how to use some fancy new graphics, and I don't know how to make the software work, I think. So we're going to run through Talisman and Value a bit today to try to give an update on them over the first third of the season. Don't worry, listeners, we'll try and describe the fancy graphics we have here, as well as answering some questions from Twitter. So I hope that sounds alright tonight. I know it's a bit late as well after the Amazon football just finished. We'll have a chat as well as we can. We'll have a chat with chat, I should have said, as well as we can too. And thanks very much for Josh Tellin for modding tonight. Nick, welcome back to the YouTube. Welcome back to the YouTube space. You alright, mate?
Hey mate, yeah, I'm not too bad actually. Had a little bit of time off work to celebrate my birthday, and it's been a useful period to recharge my batteries, and also presented plenty of opportunity to mentally prepare for this significant period of FPL fixture congestion. So just to say who we are, you can see it on the screen as well if you're watching on YouTube, but we are Who Got This List. You can find us on Twitter at WGTA_FPL and at WGTA_Nick, and make sure to listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or even YouTube this week as well. So shall we start with the game week reviews then? So I'll go first, get it over and done with. I've also got a Dad Watch update, which we're going to move to this section too. So have you got my team on the screen now, Tom?
Yeah, it's up.
So, yeah, as you can see, for the guys on YouTube, had a bit of a shocker, 47 points. We'll get this over quickly. I captained Mane this week. Last week, my Trent Alexander-Arnold gamble didn't pay off. So I swapped to Mane, and this week it was TAA that got the points and Mane blank. So, yeah, that was a bit rubbish. Just not a great week all in all. Rashford lost his goal that became an assist, and Sterling got returns, but he was outscored by KDB yet again. So that 50-50 transfer didn't pay off. And obviously, yeah, he blanked tonight as well. So he may well be out of my team. I think it might be time to get rid of him, considering his price and value, which we'll move on to a little bit later. But yeah, should we do? Are we doing Dad's next?
Yeah, so it's Dad Watch. Not a good week for you. It's 2 consecutive weeks that haven't gone very well. But you know, you've got 2 free transfers now, haven't you? We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I'm guessing that you'll be looking to make some drastic changes to that side. But let's see how Ian's doing.
So we'll move quickly on to him, and he scored 55 points, and he was moaning that he had a bad game week, but he still managed to outscore both of us this particular game week. I think he was a little bit frustrated with the dunk points on the bench, so that was a little bit unfortunate to have him on the bench, and I know he played him over Rico this game week as well, so a little bit of a gamble there perhaps, unless he of course scores a brace against Arsenal, perhaps from 2 free kicks. We'll have to see. But Vardy just continuing to do bits for him. I think he gave him the armband, didn't he? So, Vardy can getting 12 points for him. Otherwise, it was okay game week, not much to say. Son and De Bruyne also getting points sort of down now to 50k. So a little bit of a red arrow there.
He's still doing all right. Did he play Rico this week? 9 points, or I think it's still on for Rico again.
No, he benched Rico, so he played Dunk. So
this is something your dad would do.
Yeah, so Rico's having one of those very jammy seasons, turning up for 9 points, having been substituted, and then them losing the clean sheet, of course. So all right week for him, I guess.
Yeah, no, pretty good. Unfortunately, IU hasn't come through for him this week either. On to me then. The green arrows continue. I got very, very lucky this week to get a green arrow. Sorry, this is last week now, actually. Of course, we're in a new week already. But yeah, I got very, very lucky to escape with a green arrow as such. I didn't captain Vardy, as you can see, and the fact that final minute Nacho winner took 3 bonus away from Vardy, which meant that it went from 18 points to okay, well, he scored 1 goal, but that's all right. So yeah, a little bit of an escape. That did give me the green arrow just about. I think I rose about 50k places. I'm now 10. I think it's 10 or 15 points ahead of you, Nick, something like that. Which is again a very, very rare situation. I'm not sure how long it's going to last. But yeah, Son with a pair of assists, and Kevin De Bruyne as well, and both of them got 10 points, and TAA as well. So a pair of assists. Unfortunately my captain Mane blanked. There was one moment on Match of the Day, I think I genuinely flinched when the ball went through to him and he just hit it straight at Ryan. That should have been kind of the goal at least that we needed, which would have seen us comfortably outscore Vardy. But there we go. Taking no risk this week though, and going straight on to Vardy. But yeah, no, I'm fairly pleased with where I am. No doubt I'll shoot myself in the foot spectacularly again sometime soon, as I always seem to around this time of season. I'm going out drinking tomorrow with you, Nick, as well. So God, I'm guessing that's going to go really, really wrong. Right, so now we've got all these fancy new graphics. I suppose it's time to move on to the main topic, and I guess the main topic this week is, you see what I'm about to do, but the main topic this week is Talisman Theory and Value. So they're two things that we like to keep tabs on here at WGTA, two of perhaps our kind of custom stats, custom ways of looking at the game of fantasy football, or the game of FPL, which hopefully using these kind of this way of displaying things will be able to kind of get over to you better than just kind of audio. As I said earlier, if you are listening via audio, we're going to give you a little bit of a description of each thing that we're going through. But I recommend that you watch it just so you can kind of see what we're talking about a little bit better. First thing to say though, obviously, is this may not be for everybody. I'm not going to waste too much time on caveats. You just have to assume that we thought of all of the yes buts. But it's safe to say we're not making any claims to have solved FPL with these things. We find it interesting and useful, and hope you do too. If you don't, I really don't care. Many thanks, I should say here, to our main stato, Mitchell Sterling. Congratulations on your new arrival. Ben at FPL Shiny, Prima Aditya, FPL Vran, and Vastav, who collects and collates FPL data on GitHub. So, to start with Talisman Theory, what is a talisman? Just to kind of kick off. Talisman Theory is the idea that in every team there is one player who scores the most points. Yeah, that's really simple, isn't it? It's hardly groundbreaking. But what we did, which is a little bit different, is we actually tested it. We used old data over the last couple of summers and proved it, basically. There are players like Raul Jimenez, there's players like Riyad Mahrez, Pascal Gross, who are talisman. You can read the full-length articles on our website. The way we do this is remove all non-individual points, such as appearance points, clean sheets, etc., etc. And these really are WGTA's own custom stats, this and value, as I mentioned earlier. Though, of course, the term isn't unique to us, like FFS have their own data based on football stats. But this is really about taking the data that FPL gives you as a game and looking at that game data to create something different. So we've got the first third of the season's data to show you. But I think, just to start, Nick, one thing, and it's always something that comes up, and we do explain it in the articles, is appearance points and why we remove them to find our talisman. So why do we remove them, Nick?
So as part of our talisman theory, we've not only excluded the appearance points, but also the clean sheet points as well, and the lost points for defenders when they concede more than 2 goals. And we are aware, obviously, that this penalises defenders when you are looking at the talisman, but that's not really the focus of the talisman piece. The focus of the talisman piece is to pull out those key players in the team that have the greatest impacts, the leading men, essentially. And I guess if you use a hypothetical example, it would be Eden Hazard. Perhaps if he'd only played 3/4 of the season or even half the season, but was delivering week in, week out when he did play in terms of goals and assists, you'd understandably expect him to be the talisman at Chelsea, and you wouldn't expect him to be outshone by the likes of Kepa or Azpilicueta just for being ever present and just the virtue of turning up week in, week out. I mean, the point of our talisman analysis is not to uncover those players who provide value for money. That will be covered a little bit later when we talk a little bit about value, and you'll see all those defenders stick out in terms of their value. But it's about the individual players who make the difference to their teams in terms of the end products that they deliver.
Yeah, certainly. And I think it is really, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we're not trying to solve FPL with this, and Talisman Theory really helps you to identify, and we'll speak about this a little bit later in the discussion, really the player you should be aiming to bring into your team. But as I mentioned, we have to look at which players are scoring the most points from teams, and to do that, we also need to know, in terms of teams, how many points are scored in terms of those kind of individual non-appearance points or individual points. We've put them here. As you can see, it's kind of the usual suspects in some ways, of this bit of a rudimentary bar chart, but for those listening, it shows the FPL individual points by teams, top by Man City at the moment, 323, Leicester in second, Liverpool in third, Chelsea in fourth, and those guys are all above 200 at the moment. After Liverpool, it drops off a little bit, so then you get Chelsea and Spurs, Aston Villa in a surprise entry in sixth, Arsenal, and all the teams are coming together in one big clump, all the way down to 111, where there's a big gap between the second bottom club, Crystal Palace, and Watford. Watford have just got 66 individual points so far this season. They've been really, really bad. But the one that does stick out here is Villa. Adam Hopcroft will be very, very happy to see that, because they're sixth overall for individual points, with the likes of Grealish, El Ghazi, McGinn and Hurricane are all contributing to them. Other teams, Arsenal and United are really being held up by one individual, as we'll see later. But yeah, I mean, anything that really stands out here, Nick? It's quite as you'd expect, I suppose, in some ways.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's nothing really that's particularly obvious, to point out other than what you mentioned. It's the top sides, isn't it, that have been delivering in terms of the FPL points. Manchester City really leading the way in terms of individual points by team. But when it comes to Talisman, and we'll cover that in a little bit, it's a little bit more blurred, isn't it? But then you've got the likes of Leicester, Liverpool, Chelsea, even Spurs. Leicester, Liverpool, and Chelsea in particular, all having really good seasons, and our teams are basically full of players from all four of those clubs, aren't they? And it's no surprise really when you look at the amount of points they're getting within the team. Tons of points. So I think it's a bit obvious there. I think Aston Villa, as you mentioned, the other standout team, the likes of Grealish and McGinn, when we're looking at the sort of fourth midfielders in our team, and that sort of awkward price bracket, especially this season, the likes of Grealish and McGinn and even El Ghazi are really sticking out, aren't they?
Yeah, it is. I was a bit surprised by that, and I went back to check the data. But Grealish, Aston Villa are all there just because there are so many different point scorers. But let's break that down into players, shall we? And this is a look at just kind of individual points, who scored the most effectively. For those listening, Vardy is at the top, 82 individual points scored so far, which is 18 more than anybody else. This is kind of a case of wishing I took my own advice, actually. It sounds a little bit churlish to say now, but I did highlight this back in the summer, that Vardy was an absolute star of Talisman Theory, and it really has shown over the last few weeks. Again, it sounds like I'm claiming credit for a bandwagon that I didn't really jump on until just about 3 weeks ago, but absolutely monstrous performance so far by the Leicester man. After him, it's Mane and De Bruyne. I think tonight would have done no good for De Bruyne, just a clean sheet for him. So he and Mane second, 64, De Bruyne third with 63, and then it kind of just goes down to players that you'd expect: Aubameyang, Abraham, Rashford, Aguero, Son, Salah, Pukki, who shows up a little bit, and down the bottom as well there are some players who are maybe a bit newer to this, so the likes of Mousse, just kind of slipping into the top 20, but yeah, I mean, these are guys who I guess you'd expect to be there, Nick. I mean, Aubameyang and Rashford catch my eye. They've got low scoring teams, as we saw in the overall points scored by team, but they are high scoring individuals, aren't they? So immediately we kind of see that some players are talismen, jumping out just from these two kind of data points.
Yeah, definitely. I think, when you look at the individual point scorers in terms of percentage of team points, which I think you're going to move on to in a second, Rashford and Aubameyang really, really stick out in terms of the talisman for their teams. But I think in terms of the first chart displayed with Vardy showing those 82 points, I think that form has really caught us all by surprise, to be honest. But like, looking at that effective ownership in terms of the captain pick this week, 181.470%, is just absolutely mental with Watford at home. It's no surprise really that people are looking at this guy when he just sticks out like a sore thumb in terms of the individual points he's scoring compared to everyone else. And I did a little bit of maths, a quick bit of maths anyway, outside of what our stats guys have produced, and I saw that he's set to score 298 points over the course of 38 game weeks over the course of the season if he actually keeps up this current rate of form that he's in. So yeah, Jamie Vardy really smashing it, and I've been punished a little bit by being so late to getting him in, and also late to captaining him too.
Yeah, I wish I got I got that a little bit better. I really do. I wish I'd gotten on that a little bit earlier and just taken my own advice with the Talisman Theory. But as you can see, Vardy absolutely smashing it right now. Can you guys see the? You guys can. Sorry, you guys can see the show. You guys can see the slides, right? So I'm just looking at chat. People are saying there's a little bit of a.
I can see him.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I'm just going to assume that it's all okay and that people are getting hypnotised for other reasons, probably just by our amazing presence and bands.
Oh, they've got the "Will be with you shortly" screen.
Have they?
Oh no. That's what.
Oh, teething difficulties. I think in the future I'm just going to,
Josh has it.
Cool. Why we barely do YouTube? Just because it's always a lot more of a technological pain in the bum than just talking quietly offline to each other and then releasing it as a fait accompli.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's all working. It sounds like they just need to do a refresh. Excellent.
So I know what you mean about the light. By the way, the problem is that I've got a light like kind of that. Otherwise, the room is way too dark But if I shine it right on me, it looks like I'm in a hostage video. Like, yeah, please let me out. So I'm never too sure where to put it because otherwise you can't see me, which is probably going to be a good thing for most people, right? But if I do that, it just doesn't work. So I don't know. I'll put it kind of there, and then at least this way you can tell if I'm being attacked because my shadow will move or something like that, or maybe my shadow will start doing something else entirely. Oh, where were we? Completely lost the thread now to some extent. Yeah, I think you just said about Vardy, didn't you? But let's look at another way of looking at that data, which is to get us back on track, to look at players who have scored a high percentages of their team's total points. So, for example, Man United earlier on, they scored a fairly meagre amount of over individual points overall. They scored 140. Rashford has scored a ridiculous 36.4% of all of Manchester United's kind of individual points, which is pretty crazy actually. 79 points, 7 goals and 5 assists, including 2 missed pens. That's more than a third of United's points. And second, you've got Pukki again. For those listening, he's over 33%. He scored over 33% of his team's individual points, so 35.7%. And he and Cantwell have scored over 60% of Norwich's individual attacking points, which is absolutely ridiculous. And Krul also appears. So 3 players have got basically all of Norwich's points this season, which aren't appearance, which is pretty staggering. Aubameyang's in third with 35%, and Ingsy is in fourth as well. He's also got over 33% of all of his team's attacking or / individual points. James from Planet FPL said he was showing talismanic tendencies, which definitely seems true here. The only other thing that I want to just mention quickly is lol at Foster. Foster is, he's a sixth there with 30% of his team's non-appearance points, which is absolutely ridiculous. It just shows how mentally bad they have been this year. And also Lundstram, as you mentioned, is kind of hanging out there as well.
Yeah, I think for me, perhaps the most surprising thing to pull out was the reliance that Manchester United appeared to have on Marcus Rashford so far this campaign. He just really is their key man, isn't he? With 36.4% of those individual points scored. I think it's obvious that the likes of Alexis and Lukaku leaving has really impacted Manchester United. We've also seen Martial not really step up. And last season, it was actually Pogba that was their talisman, but he's pretty much spent the entire of the campaign with an injury. So I think we'll have to see there in terms of Rashford. But, it puts him in good stead, to be honest. As a member of my team, a player that I was considering perhaps even getting rid of straight away, to see him right there at the top shows that he is going to be really important for them over that Christmas break. As you mentioned, Norwich, very interesting pull-out as well. Cantwell and Pukki really holding the team together, and Tim Krul as well off the back of those saves and penalty saves that he's made so far this season. But yeah, I think with Sheffield United, you mentioned Mousset. The likes of Mousset, sort of only 5.1 million in FPL, has got 5 goals and 3 assists to his name. There's also the likes of Danny Ings and Jordan Ayew, sort of playing really sort of pivotal roles in their team. And there are other players that you can fit into your team quite nicely over the Christmas period, where there's going to be a little bit of a fixture congestion, isn't there? And you think, actually, when Mousset was first signed for Sheffield United, we didn't really know if he was going to be a sure starter. I think he only actually had 1 goal to his name in Premier League history, which we kind of scoffed at the price they paid for him at the time. But he's really starting to show a key part of that Sheffield United attack, and a very cheap FPL player as well.
Yeah, remember, this is in some ways this isn't quite comparable. It's kind of a Liberal Democrat way of presenting data, because I mean, Rashford is a percentage of the whole of his team's points, so comparing him to Pukki isn't quite kind of comparing apples with apples. It's kind of the percentages work a little bit differently than just looking at the raw count, but still it's a nice way of kind of presenting what's going on. We do have a nice way of looking at this, which is basically to ask which teams are the most talismanic. So we've now got the information, team by team, we can see kind of which are the most talismanic, which ones are the most relying on one particular individual. The best way to do that is by comparing first and second and noticing the difference between the two. As you can see, Aubameyang, who's at the top, compared to Lacazette, Rashford compared to James or Martial, and Richarlison compared to Bernard, who incredibly is the second place guy for Everton, which is, again, where's he been in the FPL conversation? I'm sure there was one account that said, differential, Bernard, must sign this guy. He's very, very small and Brazilian. But the reality probably is that he has completely escaped our ideas. But as you can see, those 3 teams are really fantastic in terms of Talisman Theory, because they're so heavily reliant on one individual scoring the majority of their points compared to somebody else. In second, though, you've got Ings and you've got Vardy. Ings has scored 15.9% more points than Ward-Prowse, who's the second kind of talisman guy, I guess, the sloppy second for Saints. And Vardy, 27.6% of his team's individual points, as I mentioned. It's a little bit low. It's 15.5%, I think, the difference between him and Maddison. And Vardy, I guess, comes out as a bit of a real hero here, because Leicester have scored loads and loads of individual points, but he's still scored 15.5% more than the man in second in Maddison. In some ways, at the moment, he's the perfect FPL asset, certainly looking at Talisman Theory, because he's playing for a team doing so well with lots of attacking output. We saw at the start there's lots of individual points scored by the team, but on his own, he's also got that clear margin of talismanhood, I suppose. Compare that with Liverpool and City. There's 5.8% difference between Mane and Salah, and between De Bruyne and Aguero there's a 3.7% difference. Sterling's third, I think it's a 14.2%. I've got in the notes there. So I think that really you're looking at this, there are a few teams that are the usual suspects in some ways. Maybe Richarlison would be a bit of a surprise, but I think that's just because we don't really look at Everton, so we're not really keeping tabs of what's going on there. But there are some teams that are really emerging at the moment as being pretty reliant on one fella. As you mentioned, Nick, it's probably a good thing you've got Rashford in your team. And other teams, like Burnley, for example, have no discernible talisman, but you do have the Barnes train, who is a talisman in of himself.
Yeah, exactly. I think when you relate it to FPL and you talk about Manchester City, I think tonight's game is just a clear indication of the lack of a true talisman in a sort of a game week where Manchester City score 4 goals and there's nothing for Sterling and De Bruyne, which most of us own. And a lot of us would have found that very frustrating, especially those that actually are doubled up with both Sterling and De Bruyne to see City score those 4 goals. But you've got the likes of Gabriel Jesus, you've even got the likes of David Silva, Bernardo Silva and Riyad Mahrez all delivering points in terms of FPL attacking points, but nothing for the sort of the main men that we own. And Aguero being injured as well just shows that there's such a depth of options at that particular club. And when you talk about sort of the Christmas period, it does put a little bit of fear into the owners of the likes of Sterling, and think actually, they've got so much strength and depth that do they even need this player that's not particularly performing to the highest standards to even play? And perhaps Sterling might be one of those players that does get a rest over the Christmas period. And when you compare it to some of these other clubs, for instance, we mentioned Pookie at Norwich, but the likes of even perhaps obviously Rashford as well and Ings. You think actually these clubs are really dependent on these players, so they're going to start week in week out, compared to Manchester City, where you do worry a little bit that there's going to be more rotation.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, at the moment as well, it's worth stressing we're only a third of the way through the season. So normally when we look at this sort of stuff, we do it probably in this sort of environment or on the pod, and we're not saying this is the end, but we're not saying this is definitely how it is, because obviously the season's in progress. Literally a game is just finished, so it's not the case that these are the final scores. It's just how it's looking at the moment, and things can change so quickly. Like, for example, if Tarko gets another couple of goals, he'll rocket all the way up to be fighting the Burnley guys. You've got bloody Jetro Willems, who's currently the talisman for Newcastle. Okay, Newcastle are rubbish, so maybe that's not that might continue, who knows. But there are a few things here that I certainly wouldn't expect West Ham, for example, to keep being that rubbish. Well, maybe they will. I certainly wouldn't expect Foster to keep being the talisman for Watford. Maybe he will. And I'd expect some other players to emerge. For example, last year, Vardy wasn't doing particularly well in the middle and then completely exploded after Rodgers came in. So there's always lots of different factors which create the conditions for a talisman to become important. So, Nick, why are talisman important? How does it impact your FPL strategy?
Well, talisman, as I said, they're the leaders in their teams, and if they struggle, then that team will also struggle. So, you do look at the talisman, you think these are going to be the main men within the team, and you just look, for instance, like you mentioned Watford. Watford are a team that are in absolute dire straits, and the fact that their talisman is Ben Foster, who's generated 30.3% of their own team individual points, it's just an obvious concern. And you start to look at a team like Watford, and you say, definitely don't want to cover them in my FPL team. And I made some pertinent points on Manchester City as well. The lack of a discernible talisman does put a little bit of worry in the heads of FPL managers. I think actually, from going sort of a double up at Manchester City, could we even talk about not owning any Manchester City players at all over this Christmas period? Is that something that some FPL managers are starting to consider, especially those that, like myself, who own Sterling but don't perhaps fancy bringing in De Bruyne and thinking about the likes of maybe Dele Alli or Son Heung-min? But I think talisman is very important, a theory to kind of analyze, and just looking at those key men in the clubs and trying to pull out the key players.
Yeah, certainly. I think a good case of that is Danny Ings recently, just because he wasn't doing particularly well. I think he scored a couple of goals, but with the upcoming fixtures, and you kind of think, okay, fixtures can beget form. His stats were okay, but I think kind of he's got Watford. He's got Norwich. He had Watford. Now he's got Norwich, Newcastle, West Ham, and Villa. Because I guess another way of looking at it is the analog stats, his XGI is so high, and he is the talisman there. You'll be thinking, well, that's a good time for Saints to score goals. Who should I be looking at? I should be looking at the talisman. Who is that? That's Danny Ings. All right, that's probably a good excuse to get him in. And kind of from that sort of point of view, there are a lot of teams that you would be looking at to fill in those sorts of gaps. So the Talisman Theory does tend to fit in around that kind of third or fourth midfielder, like Richarlison and Arnautovic when he was midfielder was a good example. I think Millie was actually Crystal Palace's talisman last year, and Ayew is at the moment. But I signed Zaha hoping that he would kind of break into that talismanic status, or at least try to put himself in the shop window to be bought by somebody else over the next few weeks. So a lot of the time there is the kind of the tension between the fixtures and the fact that a player is a talisman. Or not the tension. The fact that the two work together, don't they? I don't know why I went there. Mm-hmm. But I guess the other kind of thing to mention as well is Rikering, which for non-Star Trek fans is when you choose the number 2 when you want to get the captain. I think often we do this, don't we? I can't quite get to Richarlison, so I'm going to buy Bernard. Maybe not that, but you know what I mean. So, like, do you often try to get the man in that you want, or have you ever tried to settle with somebody just because they're a little bit cheaper and they're easier to fit? Like, I've bought Pedro in the past when I should have bought Hazard, and I kind of watched Hazard score the hat trick and just think, oh, why did I settle for Pedro?
Well, I think I've already done that a little bit this season, to be honest, Tom. When I went for Madison, and I thought that Madison could
J Mads.
cover could cover
Oh,
Vardy,
everyone's going to stop watching now.
but I thought he could cover him, but he really couldn't, to be honest. You know, a player like Vardy, who's the key talisman at Leicester, fit, firing, as FPL Chance put in a chat, he's peak talisman, he's angry, driven, and rested. I thought Maddison could cover him. I thought, Maddison could be the man to sort of pick up those assists when Vardy scores and score. And Maddison's been doing well for me a little bit. He's been getting a few goals, but that week where he that week last week where the VAR goal got taken away from him from the penalty just really, really punished me really heavily, and it just shows that you can try and get that second man, the second player, and cover and try and cover the leading men, but often, unfortunately, it doesn't always work. And I guess that's kind of leads us quite nicely on in terms of value and trying to fit all these players into our team and how to best get the value out of your squad.
Certainly. So I've changed the slide over, Nick, and we've now got another artfully created slide by yours truly in about 5 seconds earlier on, not at work, during working hours, of course. But it's kind of just to show you that price and value perhaps aren't the same, are they? I think I mentioned last year that they do diverge during the course of the season. At the start, we've got price and the price that we've got to go on, but over time performance means that a player's price becomes less and less relevant, apart from when we're trying to find the budget to fit them in. Other than that, I guess you're looking at players who are performing commensurate or over their cost. Nick, what is value and why is this important? It's something that you very much like, and your bigger the back theory is all sort of based on it, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So you've put in your picture that value doesn't equal price, and I think it's plainly obvious for most of the people listening, but it is worth noting firstly that they're very different concepts. For instance, the classic example this season is Winston Reid, who's a very low price, but that doesn't represent value for money in FPL because he doesn't play. Value is about how much a player offers for the price. So we're looking at the high scoring, cheap players, and when we've done our calculations here, we've kept in the clean sheet, but we've removed the appearance points and added a multiplier for minutes plays. And the reason for this is sort of the classic example from last year's campaign, which you wrote about in the very good article on our website about Connor Cody, who of course showed up for every single minute, but never actually showed any potential for delivering real returns. But apparently, if you just take a raw metric, looks better value than Zaha and Mo Salah. So that's why we've done a Liberal Democratic thing or whatever, in changing the data slightly. But so going back to what you asked me there, Tom, sorry, I went on a bit of tangent. Value is extremely important in FPL for the main reason that we're always looking to have the strongest team possible with the budget we've been given. And I think this campaign has felt perhaps slightly different to the last few, perhaps reminds us a little bit of the season where we saw the likes of Riyad Mahrez and Vardy actually emerge in Leicester title-winning season because of the volume of fantastic value players that have really emerged in comparison with the high-priced duds that we have. You think of sort of Christian Eriksen versus John Lundstrom as a great example. And then, FPL managers are always trying to find the latest value pick to fit in our team. And that's what I guess we're going to cover in a little bit more depth with the aid of some beautiful charts.
Well, yeah, this is from Ben, FPL Shiny. He's been covering the value article that we did for this year, which is incredible. It's very funny that something that I just sat down and dreamt up and decided to kind of look at with a lot of help from a statistician friend of mine is something that people actually are interested in. But I think using that Connor Cody example, that really illustrates why I thought this was worth looking at in a deeper way, just because I think a lot of the time people just literally said, right, points divided by price equals their value. And with a player like Connor Cody, 0 shots the whole season last season, despite playing every minute, on a lot of the value kind of analyses that I saw, he was coming out as fantastic value, and I was just thinking that's absolute rubbish. Like, there's got to be a better way of looking at it. Hence this was born. Just for those listening, this chart, you may have seen it on Twitter as well, from FPL Shiny, basically displays the scatter of every player in FPL, and it kind of charts them against it charts basically how valuable they are. And as you can, and Lundstram obviously an absolutely huge outlier, Vardy a very large outlier as well. But I think the distribution is quite interesting because you have all these players. A lot of the dots that aren't labelled are just, I don't know what word I'd use. The reservoir, the dumpster of all those FPL players that we're just not interested in. They're in the game, but are never going to get a mention. Players like Bernard, but there are kind of that group of players who do flit in and out of that kind of the middle bit, the bit that we're interested in, who are providing value for their money. So who's the top 20, Nick?
So yeah, the main man, the leading man, obviously is John Lundstram. So he's got 75 points so far, 47 individual points. He's now at 5 million, and even with that 1 million rise that he's had from 4 million, he's still the best value player in the game. So if you don't own John Lundstram and you've missed the boat for some reason on all those points earlier on in the season, you've still got plenty of opportunity to get this guy in because he still represents fantastic value for money with a sort of a ratio of 9.16. But second is Vardy. So Vardy, even though he's expensive, he's 9.8 million, just by the virtue of the amount of goals he's getting, he's still the key man. He's still the second best value player in the game. Obviously, sort of John Lundstram's a bit of a freak occurrence thanks to some dodgy pricing by FPL Towers. But Jamie Vardy is second there. I think the other thing I'd like to quickly call out is some sort of wise moves on actually giving you some praise for a change as opposed to abuse, Tom, because I normally give you plenty of abuse when it comes to your FPL team, but I wanted to highlight the Leicester defence and the fact that they're really high on this chart and they've actually been better value for than the midfielders. And I know you made a move last week or the week before to swap out Tielemans for Chilwell, and that move actually, when you look at this chart, looks like a fantastic value move to make. And I know it enabled you to bring in Son and get those points as well. So it's a great example there of using the data and the value data to make an informed decision on your team that can really deliver for you.
Yeah, I absolutely love Chilwell. I think that he's basically Robbo light in some ways. If you look at his chance creation, I think he was 2 or 3 beneath Maddison, which is pretty crazy. I think Maddison created 99 chances last season, far and away the most chances of any player. And this year you've got a left back behind him, or left back in name, I suppose. So I thought he was really interesting. Pereira, despite the high price, coming in third, having that sort of luxury differential up there. Like, if I could have got him in, I would have got him in, to be honest. I just think there's something about him, that sort of converted wing back, I really like. And if you watch them play, like, he is often so advanced, and he and Vardy have a pretty good understanding, which is quite a strange one actually. If you think about like the FIFA the foot sort of relationship, does the right back ever have a relationship with the striker in fancy in Football Manager? That doesn't happen either, but at Leicester it does. Also, some observations of mine here. Where are the midfielders? I mean, we're all fetishising 3-5-2 at the moment, but looking at value again, obviously just there's lots of data sources out there, and this is part of not the full picture, but within this particular metric there are only 2 in the top 20 who are KDB and my cousin Todd. It looks to be, Nick, all about the defence, which is great because these players, they play the team cited in this, Leicester, mainly get points and bonus as well as attacking returns, and that also explains why Dunk's in there, why Lundstram's in there. Elsewhere, last year's hero Jimmy is still holding strong, and Pukki, Vardy and Rashford are all good. So, we've all jumped off Pukki, but really, given the price he starts at and the price he is now, he's still pretty good value for money. He appears, for example, in many dead teams, so you may have seen on Twitter people say if you made this team at the start of the season and just left it, you'd be on X thousand points and you'd be top of the world by now on 100 points more than the guy who's first. Pukki appears in all those teams just because he's just such good damn value for money. But yeah, I mean, overall, I don't know. Where do you think the midfielders have gone, Nick?
Yeah, they've completely vanished off the face of the earth, haven't they? I mean, Cantwell's there just by virtue of being ridiculously cheap and pretty good bench fodder. But apart from Cantwell, it's just De Bruyne, the only one that really stands out. So perhaps we're due a death of the fourth midfielder article in the summer, or maybe not, because obviously this is just one trend for this particular season, and we've seen in the past that the midfielders have been good value for of money. It's a little bit of a strange one, isn't it? And you do look at the midfield and you think who's actually been decent in terms of that fourth midfield pick. And people were asking me for options. I couldn't really think of anyone. It's just the Aston Villa men that perhaps standing out at the moment, the likes of Jack Grealish, and we've seen Mason Mount as well. But Mason Mount's form's dropped a little bit in recent weeks. So yeah, the midfielders seem to be struggling, and it's the defenders that are sticking out. The likes of the Sheffield United defence, not just John Lundstram, but George Baldock as well, who's really high up on the charts for a player that's got a very, very low ownership.
Yeah, certainly. Also, I think he's the brother of Sam Baldock as well, Brighton hero. Moving on just slightly to the value by position. Obviously, the keepers are a bit meh, but the defenders, just one man obviously standing out hugely in Lundstram, who is I think we've said more than we ever need to say on John Lundstram. He's turning into the new Mo Salah, isn't he, in some ways? But just the class above, the best value player ever in FPL. But beneath him, like the most one kind of anomaly, one blunder, one failure to Google over the summer from official FPL towers. It is really astonishing to see Pereira and Soyuncu coming out as probably the best value players other than their teammate Vardy. It just really goes to show how defenders are consistently such good value for money, which is a theme that you've kind of come back to so many times, Nick. It's untrue. In the midfielders, they've got the lowest overall sort of average value in that top 10. The likes of JWP coming through, and Villa doing pretty well, having two representatives within that top 10. And in the forwards, you do have a lot of choice. We do have a lot of choice because there are only three spots there. But Vardy, Pukki, and Rashford being the top three, and Jimenez just behind Rashford, I guess goes to show that at the moment, if we look at things through a value sort of lens, it's all about those sort of positions other than the midfield, I suppose, right now. But that Vardy party is amazing again here, because he comes through in Talisman, comes through in value. I just think he is pretty much, according to these kind of custom metrics, the standout FPL option at the moment. I mean, there are a few people who still don't have him, presumably. Why not? Why'd you do it to yourself? Radiohead comes on in my head, doesn't it? You do it to yourself, just you. What do you think about this, Nick?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'd reiterate all those points you made there. I think the defenders really sticking out in terms of the value, but also the forwards. Jimenez, another player that I think we neglected to mention in the talisman section, but he's the talisman for Wolves. He's one of the best value picks again in the game, despite being more expensive this season at 7.7 million. These are the key guys. And you mentioned Soyuncu as well, another player that got a very nice price at the beginning of the season, and has been delivering on the FPL points. But even Pereira was a player we scoffed a little bit, actually, didn't we, Tom? If we're going to be honest, when he got given the 6 million price tag, we thought that's him out the game alongside Matt Doherty, who was one of our favourite players from last season. But both Pereira and even Doherty have been delivering in terms of those FPL points, and Doherty's 6 million, so he's not in the charts, but he's still actually better valued than a high number of those midfielders that we consider to be more important in our teams. And I think when you look at value, you think actually, you could put all your money in defence, could have put all your money in the midfield, in the forward line, and sacrifice the midfield at least this season. We're not saying this is the trends going forward for FPL. We're just looking at the data from this season and making a few informed opinions.
Yeah, and of course, as we saw at the start of the season, I think what's important is that value is something which kind of accumulates over the course of the season. Like, there are kind of spots in the season, again, like the start of the season, where value perhaps doesn't translate into points, but over a longer period of time, you will start to see those valuable picks really start to show through, as evidenced by those teams, which are, as I mentioned earlier, if you pick this team, you'd be 100 points up on the number one in the world. But I still think the value is very important, and obviously it's not static, because we're only a third of the way through the season. There's lots of clubs that could still emerge from this. Spurs, we haven't spoken about them 1 second for any of this, and that's because they were just so rubbish at the start of the season. But under the saviour Mourinho, maybe we'll see them start to intrude on the value and on the talisman stats. But there's lots of players from clubs like Leicester. I think you touched on it a second ago, Nick, that are just absolutely running away with these metrics just because they were so low priced and they have produced such amazing outputs this season. I said on the pod a few weeks ago that it really reminds me of the Leicester season when Spurs and them were just such fantastic value that it just basically made team value into an irrelevance because you could pack in all these players and have lots of money to spare. At the moment it's not quite like that, but still it's been very, very good for us, hasn't it, to have these sorts of guys. And the guy here on the screen, John Lundstrom, is the most valuable player ever, 4.0 attacking midfielder, and Sheffield United are doing very well at the moment, aren't they? But how do you see value going forward, Nick?
Well, yeah, it is interesting. And I think we haven't really touched on Chelsea as well. Chelsea being a side this season where their highest priced player at the beginning of the season was 7.5 million, and that was Pulisic. And, that enabled, all these players to emerge this season that perhaps kind of appeared from the periphery and we weren't really expecting to deliver, such as, Mason Mount and Tammy Abraham and Tamori as well. Another player that was only priced at 4.5 million and sort of became has become key in that Chelsea defence. But value is an ever-changing picture as well. Looking at the graphics, I think what I kind of noticed was at the beginning of the season, we're basing it on the current price as opposed to the price at the beginning of the season. So Abraham is now 7.9 million. And when I think about bringing him back in, perhaps at the expense of Rashford, I was quite surprised actually to see on current price, Rashford's now become better value than Tammy Abraham. And that's not something I was really expecting to see in the data, because I was thinking, I could bring back Abraham and, spread the value and have more value in my team. But according to the data, that's not an accurate statement to make, because even at sort of 0.8 million more expensive, Rashford now has become better value than Tammy Abraham. And, it feels like a strange thing to say based on Abraham's form this season, but that's because of the price rises he's had.
Yeah. We should have mentioned Chelsea, shouldn't we? I think Tamori doesn't actually show up in the defenders. Abraham does kind of nudge into the forwards, and Mount actually is in the top 10 for midfielders at the moment. But I think that's a bit of a legacy nostalgia pit to some extent. I mean, I have sold him, so I would say that. So it would be interesting to see if he can keep it up over the course of the season. I think that he's been found out a little bit, as I said on the hub yesterday. But yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see how both of these sort of metrics develop over the course of the year. Presenting them a third of the way in is always a bit dodgy. It's kind of like saying we've got a low base. Like, at the start of the season, everybody was saying we've got a low base, we can't make any decisions. So at least we certainly were. Probably why we lost loads of listeners actually, because we weren't being decisive. But it is still the case now. These things do come with a hefty health warning, but they are really interesting, I think, just to see how the FPL game is evolving as the season rolls forward. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see what sort of teams emerge from it. Anything more to say on these two things, Nick?
Nope. I think it's quite interesting to say as well. Obviously, with the midfielders, there's more of a selection, it feels like, compared to some of the other positions. For instance, on the forwards lines, I was entertained to see Callum Wilson sort of make the list in terms of the best value forward picks. Appearing at 10th in 10th position with sort of value of 3.82, but by that point in midfielders we're looking at 4.31. The likes of James Ward-Prowse somehow making the charts as well, but at least there seems to be more value across a larger range of the midfielders compared to forwards, where perhaps we're kind of siloed in between sort of 5 to 6 true actual picks.
Maybe because we said it so much, but the word value has lost all meaning to me now. Value. It's a bit of a strange one, isn't it? Anyway, we've got a couple of questions to talk about as well. We'll take some questions from the chat, just so we can relate things to the now. The first thing to talk... I should probably say, actually, at that point, I'll put some of these data things on Twitter as well, so people can see them and read them at their leisure. But hopefully, I think this was quite a nice medium. Hopefully, to make it work, next time we'll be a little bit more chill when we do it. It's the first time we've done it for a while. That's what I said to my girlfriend when we first got together. Anyway, the first question this week is from Rob White. He asked, is now the time to swap non-playing bench warmers for cheap but likely starters ahead of the festive period to counter Christmas rotation? I think before even turning over to you, Nick, I think the answer is yes. But I'd also note that a lot of people do have strong benches at the moment by default. And actually, like, I'm a good example of this. I got really lucky. I've got Martin Kelly on my bench. I've got Todd Cantwell on my bench, and I've got Soyuncu on my bench. And Soyuncu is one of those players I'm very happy to have. 4.5 million, can come off the bench if I need him. The other two were junk 3 weeks ago. Absolute junk. Like, James on Planet FPL said that was the worst signing of my season, buying Cantwell. Like, Kelly, I bought him as frankly a you'll do on my wild card. Again, there's a girlfriend joke there. But like, they've suddenly become viable starters. Like this evening, Kelly kept a clean sheet with 10 men, which is pretty damn good despite being an incredibly limited player at 4.1. His price is only going to go up, isn't it? And Campbell is just again seems to have rediscovered his form. As you saw in the talisman data, in the value data, he's actually showing up, and of course he will for 4.5 as a start price, 4.6 now. Although Muggins said I bought him at 4.8, so I've lost 0.2 on my cousin so far. So yeah, I think it's always useful to have the bench warmers over Christmas. What I would say is that Christmas rotation we saw last year got really, really overstated, and there was lots of panic about it. And actually, most of the time, we only ever got to the third sub, I think, once. Most of it was just one guy having a break every now and again. So really, it wasn't as bad as it was made out to be. It wasn't the nuclear Armageddon. It wasn't sort of a Brexit level sort of thing going on. Nick, what do you think to Rob's question?
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I think it's always good to have a full strength bench, and I don't really think there's much of an excuse this year to have those non-playing players with so many cheap options out there. I mean, you might be able to get away with one type Winston Reid character at perhaps 3.9 million on your bench, but it really isn't that much of an investment to bring in the likes of Rico just to sit there and accrue 9 points a week in, week out on your bench, or Cousin Todd, as you said, or even if you're really heavily strapped for cash, I shoved Isaac Hayden in there at 4.4 million on my wild card. But I think a lot of us are playing week in, week out now with a sort of 12 to 13 man squad, and I think it's quite useful. It kind of does annoy managers a little bit when you've got to kind of think about, do I play Soyuncu or do I play Lundstrom or Tamori, and we keep having to make these decisions week in, week out, and it does create a bit of a selection dilemma, but it does also provide a little bit of comfort to have those sort of backup bench options to come on in the case of emergencies if one of your starting players doesn't play, and you don't want to be in a situation where you've only got 10 men showing up in the game week. So I think you're only looking at perhaps 0.2, 0.3 million extra cash just to have, a few players on the bench that will come on and do a job for you.
Yeah, certainly. And a big shout out to our friend FPL Stag here, who seems to have consistently managed to bench one or two players who have gotten between them double figures week in, week out, which just kind of goes to show kind of the ultimate extension of what you're saying, that all the clubs, everyone's team should have two of those players. And for example, people are benching Mount this week and playing Cantwell. Like, we've just gotten to a situation where there's a lot of value in the cheap seats, and it means that there's all these sorts of options to do a job for you in a budget-friendly way, and yeah, I just think that it's worth doing, but I wouldn't be killing myself. I wouldn't take a -4 or something to sort out your bench now. I think it's something you can manage over the course of time, because we've barely seen kind of the need to go to that third bench. I think as long as you've got one or two, you're probably okay. But for example, for me, I'm some weeks, this week, Soyuncu's on my bench because I literally have no way of fitting him into my team, which is kind of not how I like to play. I like to play with like an obvious bench, but no, I think it's quite nice as well to have that extra insurance, isn't it? Moving on to Tom at FPL Centre. His question is, ahead of an always busy Christmas period, mental stamina in FPL, what tips and tricks do we have to make sure our decision making stays sharp with so many game weeks coming at you like a freight train? Nick, what do? You just turn off, don't you?
Yeah, I managed to manage it. I think we can complain about mental stamina, but I think the actual footballers have to go through a lot more than what we have to do. So I think we can't complain too much. But I think, when you're trying to manage your team and figure out what the hell you're doing, it's always worth looking at the 5-week forecast, as I would put it, and seeing what's happening with each of the players you're thinking about transferring in and out, just to keep your eye on the fixtures and what's going on, and think about any other competitions the players are in as well. Because obviously it's worth highlighting the Liverpool blank at this particular moment in time in game week 18. And that's the kind of thing that might catch a few managers off guard when they're kind of making their changes. They might think, oh, Liverpool, great team to triple up on. But, that game week 18 is such a horrific game week,
So bad, isn't it?
Spurs, I think City play Chelsea and Spurs play Leicester, and it's just going to kill the entire of your team essentially. So, that's the kind of thing at this sort of fixture congestion, just to have that in the back of your mind. I think actually, I could be thinking about doubling up on Sheffield United, for instance, because they've got a really nice run of 5 fixtures: Newcastle, Norwich, Villa, Brighton, Watford. So, really puts the likes of Lys Mousset or even, a double up in defence, looks like quite a decent idea at this particular moment in time, or even another Wolves player as well for that week, because they play Norwich. I think they're one of the only teams with a decent fixture. Or Aston Villa actually as well, another one perhaps to mention. They play Southampton at home that week, so you could be looking at Grealish, you could be looking at McGinn to fit a slot in your team. So I think that's one thing I would say. This is really hard period for all the FPL teams because of all the fixtures, all the congestion, and for the managers as well. We just need to have that in the back of our mind, just to know that the games are coming thick and fast, but just keep an eye in terms of what's happening over this Christmas period for each club.
Yeah, and I think this is also a time when you start to favour those sort of players that both have the points potential in their locker, and they're pretty much undroppable and unrotatable, I suppose. So the likes of Jamie Vardy, the likes of Wilf Zaha, I'm still going to be flogging that horse until he gets some points off tonight's 3 points. There was a red card, but part of the appeal of getting him in was the fixtures are very, very good, and I don't think Palace can ever drop him because he just offers so much to them in terms of their attacking plan going forward. Obviously, you got if Jeffrey Schlupp can slip one in, but really it is all about Zaha and what he can offer. Having a little player like that is just so useful. Knowing that they're going to start is half the battle won over Christmas. And I think looking for opportunities like that to bring a player like that in are very, very useful. In terms of mental stamina, there's so much stuff going on in your actual life as well at this point, right? Like, there's Christmas parties going on, there's seeing relatives going on. Okay, maybe we'll be thinking about FPL if we're seeing relatives. There's lots of other distractions. So really, when you're kind of at this point when you're thinking about your team, it's, as Nick said, just try and keep an eye on what's happening. Trying to keep an eye on Twitter every now and again. But I mean, I don't really get too bad around this time. It's just making sure you're awake, as Dan just said in the chat, for the deadlines to set your team properly. Make sure you set your vice captain. That's probably the key for me. Make sure you actually think about it. That's what I've done that in the past. And make sure you make your changes before price changes happen. Even if you are drunk, just make sure you do it. I remember one time, Nick, I was at your house for New Year's, meant to get Aguero in, had 0.0. Fell asleep in the taxi home. We just went upstairs, went to bed, woke up in the morning, and he'd risen, and I had to get I think it was Matt Phillips and KDB in instead to try to Riker it. Yeah. Try to keep an eye on everything, but I just don't think it's that much to worry about. That rotation's going to happen. We know it's going to happen. Just don't worry about it. And the final thing, I guess, is Spurs. We haven't really spoken about them too much, and obviously well covered. But Nico asks, Ali or Son from game week 16.
So I think for me, I'm actually leaning towards Ali. I think obviously he's 1.3 million cheaper, but it's not just about the money and the value. I think Ali he seems like a changed man. He's refreshed with the new manager coming in. He seems to be a little bit more confidence under his belt to play that more marauding and attacking role that we saw from him in 2016/17. I mean, I did look at the stats, and in terms of the underlying stats, the averages, Son has sort of on the fantasy football scale, he has a sort of +7 in the key metrics compared to Ali. I mean, Son has had twice as many goal attempts on average, more shots on target, and more penalty box touches on average. But Ali has had better conversion, more goals on average, and better big chances. And he does seem like he's converting those chances when he gets them. And he's looking refreshed. He's got that sort of fighting spirit that he seems to have lacked in the last couple of years. So I think for me, I would go for Ali. But I don't know what you think. I know you're a Son owner, Tom.
Yeah, I think this has again been done to death. I basically just default to whatever James from Planet FPL says on Spurs these days. But I think that either is a good pick. Ali is just such good value for money that he just gives you something which. He gives you that extra sort of flex if you need it. Son is a little bit more expensive, which can be a bit annoying for people. Alex Ball was just asked in the chat, am I tempted to flip Son for Ali? The answer is I would be if I needed the cash. But to some extent, like I think the quotes from Mourinho before he joined Spurs and what a number 10 was were really telling. It was he has to be at 9.5 going forward and 8.5 when they don't have the ball. And in that shadow striker role, Ali is basically out of position, isn't he? Which is pretty damn good. And he is very, very good at finishing as well. You saw that take from the Toby Crossfield rake ball. I do really like Ali, and I really wish I did go for him. The reason that I went for Son is that I love Son, and also my cousin, who is one of my main mini league rivals, bought in Ali a week before. So I kind of thought to myself, okay, I know that Mark's got Ali, I'm going to go Son and try to differentiate there. And really I should have kind of thought about the wider FPL sort of thing about it. But I mean, I'm happy with Son. I think over the next kind of few weeks he will match Ali or hopefully outscore Ali. It's just the case that if you kind of throw in value for money, Ali is pretty even to Son, isn't he? I can see myself doubling up, to be honest. Just because there's that kind of lovely triple of fixtures between 19 and 21, where they play Brighton, Norwich, and Southampton, and plus that Chelsea game as well in game week 18. I remember him scoring a brace for me a few years ago against them. I think he's got quite a good record against them, and they're no great shakes at the back. So it could well be that he comes in. It's just where's the space going to be? How am I going to get that guy in? So I just don't know. But I really, really like those two. I think they could very, very easily be in many people's teams as a nice little double up sword. Cool. Any questions from chat? I will cut this bit out of the audio. Did you see anything?
I think Andrew Martin's asked us about KDB and whether we can just go with him as the only City coverage. I'd probably say yes. At the moment, there's not too many options in the defence. Gabriel Jesus is an option, presenting himself as an option in the forward line, but I'm not sure how he fits in sort of the Vardy, Jimenez, Rashford, Abraham molds because of he's a little bit more expensive than those guys. He's not too highly owned, so I'm not overly worried about him scoring or getting returns. When you look at ownership, I think in the midfield it's obviously De Bruyne, and you do worry about the minutes and the Bernardo Silva and Riyad Mahrez and David Silva to make them real FPL options. And Sterling, he's got to go, unfortunately for me. He's on his way out. Probably will put De Bruyne in. We'll talk about that a little bit more in transfers and captains. But I think definitely you can probably get away with the one City option at the moment.
Yeah, I think you can as well. I paid 9.5 for De Bruyne. I mean, obviously he blanked tonight, but I just don't know though. I just don't see any reason to remove him. Another guy tonight, David Silva, 2 assists. Obviously the second assist was a classic FPL assist. I don't know if he's still got it, but he's so cheap, isn't he, that if you in a situation like we are at the moment with a decent bench, obviously Alex has mentioned him as well, if you are not going to be captaining, couldn't he? He's a really good option, isn't he? You can just kind of shove him in 7.4, 7.5, wherever it is. And if he doesn't play, you've got Cantwell or something like that coming off. I guess it might be kind of slightly decent as a pick if you're not captaining, but it's not too bad.
Yeah, I mean, I don't particularly like their fixtures either with Manchester City, so I think it is a relatively decent time to kind of try and not cover them. You know, they got United. I don't know, you see Arsenal was a easy match for them, plenty of goals there, but then they got Leicester at home in that game week 18 and Wolves away, and then Sheffield United at home, which will be another sort of tough, probably a low scoring game as well. So yeah, I mean, I don't think, even though sort of City appeared right at the top of those team points, I think when you talk about the talisman, KDB's the man to have, and you know the points are too evenly shared out between the other players. I think David Silva, worth mentioning by virtue of his 2 assists tonight, but you know he's another player perhaps. It's unfair to describe him as mercurial, but in terms of FPL, he has been relatively mercurial over the past couple of seasons.
Cool. And next question, James Harding. I guess linking back a second ago to the Spurs, so we'll answer it quickly. Which two of Son, Ali, and Kane would we go for? So the double up. I think it would be Ali and Son for me there. I'm still not convinced by Kane. I don't want to go on an anti-Kane diatribe, so I get told that I'm anti-Spurs, which I'm not. But yeah, it's got to be Ali and Kane because Kane's just too expensive.
Yeah, I think I'd say exactly the same. I think Son and Ali would be the two players that I would mention. FPL Chancellors also asked us about the attendance and what it's looking like for the event on the 13th, and it's worth giving that a quick shout out as well, isn't it, Tom?
Yep, so it's the 13th of December, Friday the 13th, that is. Lucky day for us at FPL Managers. The Marylebone Sports Bar and Grill from 6 p.m. onwards. And we've, to answer Dan's question, we've got, I think it's about 60, 70 people coming. And I made the mistake of saying, don't tell me if you're coming. So I'm hoping there'll be more people who are going to show up. But we've got the whole back bit kind of... from if you came in the summer, we've got that whole kind of back bit taken just for FPL effectively. So yeah, it should be a really, really good night. I know it's also James from FPL Planet, who I've mentioned quite a few times. I just can't stop talking about him. I just love him as a person. But it's his birthday that evening, so we're all on a very, very good mission to get him incredibly twatted. Wasted, I should say. But yeah, no, it should be a really good night. All right, let's just round this off for Nick and talk about transfers and captains. Now, this is a bit weird, isn't it? Because obviously the game week's already happened. So this has already happened. This is already in play. So what did you do? And what are you thinking of doing next week? I guess is
I don't know. Have you got the team to show, Tom?
Yeah, it's up.
Perfect. So yeah, as you can see, I've captain Jamie Vardy, like pretty much every single other person in the game. So it's kind of just a pointless move there. I didn't actually make any transfers at all. I decided to roll my transfer, even though my team's been a bit rubbish. It didn't feel like the right moment with who was playing who in this particular game week. So I had Sterling for his fantastic 3-pointer against Burnley, but no changes to the team. I opted to bench Tomori. It was a really hard decision yet again in terms of which defenders to bench, and of course there's a Rico 9-pointer already sitting there in my second substitute position. So yeah, that's what I did this week. If we're going to talk about next week as well, at the moment it does look like I'm going to be using 2 free transfers ahead of the weekend, possibly even a -4 I am heavily considering, but at the moment it looks like potentially a Sterling and Mount transfer out and bringing in De Bruyne and Ali. I think that looks like a pretty decent move. I'm just considering maybe a Rashford to Abraham move as well, but I'm not sure if that's worth it at the moment based on the analysis that we've looked at today. So, that's what I'm considering at the moment anyway. I'm not sure about the -4 right now. But yeah, looks like Sterling's definitely on his way out and probably Mount to get in Ali.
Yeah, I think Ali and De Bruyne sounds like a law firm, and also a very, very good move for this particular thing. Just go, I don't know. I think Ali makes sense being a Spurs cover. Just, I don't know. KDB back in, just as I think Josh from Always Cheating was saying as well, that he's likely to bring him back in as well. Just raise the white flag and just bring him back in. I think that kind of makes sense. So, lots of mistakes have been made by yours truly, actually, for not bringing players back in and being too proud to not do it. So, yeah, it definitely makes sense. My team this week, I did Mount for Zaha, which obviously has worked out incredibly well, and I'm hoping that Tammy Abraham plays tomorrow. There was a very, very good analysis done on the training videos, which showed a man fitting Tammy Abraham's description being cropped out of a photo. So I'm very, very much hoping that he plays. If not, Solanchu will come off the bench. That team is actually looking quite strong. There's no one. I mean, I would maybe want Ali, but that team's looking pretty strong. So I'm not really too worried. I think this weekend I'm gonna try to roll it. I just kind of did the Mount to Zaha move because I was in last chance saloon really. I was snooking myself a little bit. So I bought Son over Ali, which meant that I was at 0.0 in the bank, which then meant that I had that one opportunity. Without breaking to Eminem, one chance, one opportunity to move Mount into to Zaha, and I thought I'd just take it.
I don't want to hear about your sweaty palms, Tom.
Vomit on my sweater already, mum spaghetti. But I wasn't nervous until the red card for Sacco, and then that basically poo-pooed any chance I think of Zaha doing anything. But Zaha is not just for one game; it's for a long time. So I'm very happy with the team as it stands. Right. That's basically it. That's basically the whole stream. I think in the future we'll come back and try to do something else. Just maybe a bit more, a bit less data heavy, but we'll see. Hopefully it was vaguely useful, hopefully vaguely interesting. But yeah, just say who we are. Of course, we are Who Got This This. You can find us online, as you can see. Who Got This at WGTA_FPL and Nick at WGTA_Nick. We'll be back next week as normal, doing a pod without being able to see our faces, but we'll maybe do some more of this in the future. Now I can see these fancy graphics, and our amazing friend Marco has sorted these out for us.
Yeah, thanks guys for listening, and thanks guys for all the for listening on the YouTube as well. Yeah, appreciated all the questions and your feedback. Cheers, guys.
Thanks. Right, I guess that's it. We are. I don't think we're going to be supplanting Lee and Sam from FPL Family anytime soon, but we're hopefully we'll do a few more of these going forward, and hopefully that wasn't too bad. Now we've got all of this set up. I'm very kind of hopeful of being able to do something quite fun with this. I've also got a solo set up as well, so I'll be able to do some videos on my own if needed, which could be quite good fun too. So get rid of Nick and just talk about a subject of my choice. Who knows? No, we didn't do a theme. I think as we ease into it, I think that we'll try to do better. But I think just it's very rare that we do this live, right? Normally we've got a bit more time because it's just me and Nick in our obviously like just kind of chatting without an audience, so we're a bit more kind of it's a different dynamic, I suppose, with people actually watching you.
That was purely unscripted humour from who got the assist there.
Oh god, yeah. What did we miss in the script? Did we miss anything? I'm sure we missed quite a lot.